So my dad worked on the stealth bombers and Mach 3 and with North American aviation and a long history of top secret projects, and was always at Wright-Pat and things like that. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which was one of those kind of places.
You shared some of these books with me, Oak Ridge Institute of Nuclear Studies, United States Aerospace Nuclear Power Programs. I mean, this is some of the stuff that your dad was working on, right? Hello, EE Systems family. Here we are with a CubeSide chat with Dr. Sandra Rose Michael, and we're going to start today with a show and tell of your amazing and beautiful family history, because it's quite rare for a couple physicists that are deeply in love and have children that are also geniuses. So I'm really excited about this story because I'm absolutely astonished that you don't have a biography or a series of documentaries about your life and your life's work that's so profound. So it's an absolute honor to hear it from you directly. And let's dive into mom and dad and their story and their brilliance.
Yeah, because we have talked about this quite a few times on, with different interviews, because people will ask, well, where did this all start? Well, it started when my parents were in engineering physics at Ohio State University. And my mother, the nuclear physicist, she'd passed all the top secret clearances, but a nuclear physicist. And my dad, the electrical, mechanical, structural, aeronautical engineer. And so they met, and it was kind of a funny thing. I know you saw that picture. Where's that picture with my mother? But you'll see it. They met, and she, the saying then was, guys don't make passes at girls that wear glasses. And so she did not want to wear her glasses, but she was blind as a bat in one eye and couldn't see out of the other. And that was always their joke for both of them. So she wasn't wearing her glasses, and she thought my dad was her lab partner.
Oh, how cute.
And that's how they met.
Well, definitely now lab partner to life partner.
Yeah, it's a very kind of interesting background for how they met and got together. And so then we have a picture we'll show of their wedding.
Yes.
It was a Christmas wedding. And I mean, we've told the story, but it would really have to laugh about it because where do two hyper genius geeks, nerds, go for their honeymoon in the 50s? Early 50s. This was 52.
Well,
think about that one.
Let's see. If smart is sexy and they're not a laboratory, but something cooler, an observatory or something of that?
Yeah.
Where would they go?
Niagara Falls.
Okay.
But the real reason is Tesla's power plant.
That makes sense, of course.
The great Tesla power plant. And so that's where I was conceived. Oops,
and
because that was a big oops.
Oh.
Yeah, my mother never wanted to be a mother. She never wanted to be a housekeeper. She never wanted to be the cook to clean.
She's a scientist.
Yeah, she wanted to be this great research scientist. And her mother told her that if she douched on her wedding night, she wouldn't get pregnant.
That didn't work out.
Oops. And then somehow it was all my fault.
Yeah, you wanted to come in, and specifically through them, apparently.
I came through that rush of the Niagara Falls. Oops. And with them focused on the Tesla research there.
Wow. Conceived in the field. Quite literally.
And so literally, that have been, my entire life, I have worked with Tesla's experiments and work. And actually to this day, part of the request was to create the technology to override all the abuse of Tesla's work.
Does that have something to do with what your mother was working on when she was pregnant with you?
Yeah. Yeah. So Battelle Labs is where this Battelle News, April of 53. This is one of the things I found when I was cleaning up their house, So yeah, that's an original computer. But she could tell people that she was a photographer there, but the vivid recall and the memories finally got that all clarified before she passed, but the vivid recall, no, she was fissioning plutonium in the labs the whole
Whoa.
time she was pregnant with me, and I remember it vividly. I had a bit of radiation exposure, so I really talk about how I l I literally know and understand radiation from the inside out. And she had prayed to get the bomb before the Russians, and she's very religious. I come from a very, very staunch, on both sides, staunch, Lutheran lineage,
Mm.
with my dad being in the lineage of Martin Luther.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah,
And is he a minister as well?
no,
No,
but it
but
was,
very
yeah, we were in church twice a week at least, but
wow.
yeah, because they founded the Lutheran Church in Ohio, kind of stuff. Yeah, so that yeah, very interesting, very
Spirit and science.
staunch. Yeah, and so my mother was praying to, do the bomb and working on the bomb.
Wow.
Yeah, and my dad did all top secret stuff as well, working on all stealth bombers and Mach 3
Mm.
and things like that. So,
We have that
yeah,
here somewhere.
yeah, this is the Battelle Labs stuff is fascinating. Um, but yeah, where's this? Okay, we have
We
we
have
have
the stuff on
so
your
much
dad.
material. Um,
Maybe I left it up there.
yeah, so much material. So my dad worked on the stealth bombers and Mach 3 and with North American aviation and a long history of top secret projects and was always at Wright-Pat and things like that. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which was one of those kind of
Well,
places.
you shared some of these books with me, Oak Ridge Institute of Nuclear Studies, United States Aerospace Nuclear Power Programs. I mean, this is some of the stuff that your dad was working on, right?
Yeah, my dad and my mom, and yeah, and that's what I grew up with. Literally grew up doing all the experiments and electricity and things. My favorite toys growing up, Geiger counters and gyroscopes. I had collections of them. I thought they were everybody's favorite toys.
Sure, that's
And
totally normal.
but experiments, electricity, but I did literally all of Tesla's experiments, levitating things and building rockets in the backyard and on the farm in Ohio, Marion, Ohio.
That sounds like fun.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's quite an interesting historical place where, the farm had been in my dad's family since it was deeded, by President Andrew Jackson.
Wow.
And so the original farmhouse was logs, and, so we had 160 acres.
To
But
play on and do experiments of all kinds.
yeah, so the walls were very thick, because the original house was, uh was log. So, interesting history. Grew up with knowing all the history because my dad photographic memory,
That helps.
absolutely photographic memory on every detail and speck of history, but also every speck of every plane, of every car. He was a car collector, and, he taught navigation till he passed in his 80s. He was still teaching navigation,
That's
the
powerful.
old school navigation skills. So grew up with the boats and the and the cars the planes, and, he wanted to be a pilot. He was in the Air Force, and they gave him an honorable discharge to go into the aeronautical, because he really was a genius at aeronautical engineering.
And that's where they wanted his genius.
Mhm.
Tell us about your dolly. This is a sweet, cuddly doll.
Yeah, these are my favorite dolls as I was growing up. It's a little different.
Mm.
So that was the Visible Man, and the Visible Woman is lost, but I was so excited when I found him when I was going through their attic,
Mhm.
you know, when my dad passed, and I found my Visible Man. So, because it was a whole full real course in the anatomy
Yeah,
Of
that's
course, that was my
wow.
favorite college courses I did was anatomy, physiology.
Foundations of becoming a doctor,
Mhm.
right? Amazing.
Yeah, because I came in, my mother was working on the bomb, my dad working on stealth bombers, and I come in going, "How do we heal all of this? How do we bring healing to the world?" That was my intention and quest from as far back as I can remember with my prayers. So I came in my mother didn't wanna be a mother, so there wasn't a lot of bonding with her because she kinda resented,
Mm,
kind of resented, she
kind of.
yeah. Anyway, then and so there hyper genius, but she didn't wanna be a mother, so I stayed totally bonded to spirit, very, very closely bonded
Mm,
with being and very important, so and with being in that Lutheran lineage, I literally read that Bible cover to cover
mm.
6 times by the time I was 12.
Wow. Okay.
But being a researcher, which I wanted all the information, all the knowledge, so by the time I was 12, I had every translation I could find of the Bible, all the things to reference, what they translated and what, when, where, why, how, but also listening to spirit and getting all the real stories. So
Mm.
so that is my foundation in that Lutheran church. And of course, he was a rebel, the first protester, the Protestant thing.
Oh,
He was one that, you know, uh, the Catholics said only the priests were qualified to read. Now, the whole Lutheran thing is all about reading. So you had the Gutenberg Bible and all that stuff,
mm.
that we should all have a personal relationship with God and not just go through a priest. But so the reading was like a key component to that. So very interesting, perfect background. But the reason I could do all that is, my mother belonged to Mensa. And
Smartest people in the world.
yeah, which for those of you that don't know, that's an IQ in the top 1%. Yeah. And so yeah, I grew up doing all of the Mensa brain trainings and speed reading was another one of my favorite toys. This is something that all kids should really grow up with.
Agreed.
You know?
Especially for the amount of reading that they're doing in schools now. And when you're reading the Bible 6 times, it helps to read faster.
It helps to read faster, but yeah, it had a shutter, a shutter, and you'd start with one word at, you know, 1/10 of a
Speed.
yeah, and with the speed. And you'd start with one speed going slower, so you see it longer, one word, one speed, and you go up to, phrases and sentences, then paragraphs,
Mm.
and you bring the shutter speed down farther and farther.
Mm.
So that's part of what I actually entrained this for is for photo reading.
Oh,
That's part
that
of
makes
what
sense
it's
now.
training the brain to do, like, photo reading, to process that way, because I understood that so well from growing up with it from the time I was very, very young.
Mm.
I was already reading in kindergarten, obviously, but by 3rd grade, I was reading college level. But what my thing that I was the big deal for me in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, I read encyclopedias cover to cover, dictionaries cover to cover. I wanted all the information. I'm a researcher, and collections of encyclopedias. I at least was blessed to have that in my family. So it was collections of multiple encyclopedia sets where I could compare everything and do the research, anything I wanted to. Now there's Google, but we did not have that. So, but I was literally reading those encyclopedias cover to cover and doing all the experiments and things, building transducers and receivers and circuit boards and my own ham radios and but also coming in as a healer and from the inside out understanding that everything is a circuitry. And I could hold my hands around the animals and watch how the energy would flow through that circuitry. Everything to me was engineering and physics
Mhm.
because that's my foundation.
That's how you
Literally,
came in.
I came in on that.
Yeah.
Yes. So I could see how that was a circuitry in the body and it's all energy. All
Mhm.
life is energy. But also, I would work to, because I could project my awareness, I wanted to see for myself what it felt like to be in that body, to be in that consciousness,
Mm.
to be in that, and, to look out through those eyes and see what it was like to be in that experience. And so that was part of my gift was really tracking things cell by cell through the body and literally looking at things under microscopes and all that too.
At the DNA level.
And yeah, always understanding and working from the DNA level, the cell level, and the organ level, but and looking at all the different systems that way. So I grew up that way.
Mm.
So yeah, these are my dolls, and so it's a little different.
I'm excited to share this cutie pie.
I was 4 or 5 years old, somewhere in there, about then.
How adorable.
It's pretty funny, actually.
Yeah, and I love your high school picture too, which we're going to share. And last night when we were talking, I got to learn, speaking about the DNA, I got to learn from you why you became a majorette and the baton. Will you share the baton
Oh,
with our friends?
okay.
Okay,
At home with Dr.
check this
Michael.
out.
Okay, I don't know how that's gonna show up on a camera. Anyway, I think I was 2 or 3 years old when I grabbed my first baton and started twirling it,
Oh,
but that is all the infinity wave.
there it is.
Yeah, you see how that goes, the infinity wave. So, yeah, so I was head majorette through high school. I was in, majorette corps and things before that, but it's all because of that infinity wave, and I came in with my past life recall and memories, and
Mhm.
this was something that was very important in the mystery school lineages and traditions,
Absolutely.
actually,
Yes.
where you can see it also as that double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
And Archangel Michael, who's been my main guide, you know, people ask, "How in the world have you done what you've done and you're still alive?" It's
Archangel
Archangel
Michael.
Michael. That's the only reason. He's a great guardian angel, and, we had this discussion. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that right
Yeah, we
now,
can. Absolutely.
because, I have 4 kids too, right? So I had 2 with my first husband and how we got to that marriage, but 2 with my first husband, I was 20 and 22, and then 2 with my second husband, Bertoluccini, and I was 30 and 33 by the time I had them. So when I was going through the divorce from my
From
second husband,
okay, second husband.
going through that divorce, my attorney, who was also working with me, and his vocation was an attorney, his avocation was rebirthing, the breath work.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we were
What a
good.
conscious attorney.
Uh-huh. And so we were good friends.
I
Yeah,
bet. Yeah.
because I worked with him. We initially, I worked with the rebirthing for decades, actually, the breath work.
Mhm.
And that's what aloha is, that oneness with the breath and the love of all life. But I started with the rebirthing, kind of Sandra Ray's teachings, but back further. And so he was a rebirther. And this is when I was working at the Alpha Biotic Center. And I started with rebirthing with him. And then when I was going through the divorce, I had my own center.
Mm.
This is 40 years ago,
Wow.
called the Heart Center on Betty Jane Lane in Dallas, Texas.
How cute is that?
And so he's saying, well, you should really, you can do a name change free. And I'd recommend that you do a name change. And I really didn't want to keep Bertoluccini.
It's a lot to say.
And so I'm meditating. I didn't want to go back to my maiden name either, which is Boehner, Behner, Boehner. My dad's Ralph Boehner, and we got Lois Boehner. And Boehner didn't quite seem right to go back to either
Mhm.
at this point. And so, So I was meditating and going, okay, what do okay, I can change my name, but to what?
What is my name?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is my name? It was a question. And
Mhm.
a lot of my upbringing has been all about ask and you shall receive,
Yes.
which is also from the Bible, because ask and you shall receive, be still and know means shut up and listen.
Yes, it does.
So I
Use your
asked,
intuition.
asked, and just the point that you're asking the question is the affirmation that the answer is available for you if you listen. So the trick is learning to listen.
Agreed.
So I asked, okay, what do I do with this? What is my name? And Archangel Michael appeared
Mm,
and said, you know, I'm your family, and Michael can be your family name.
how beautiful.
So that's how it went from being, Sandra Rose Boehner to
Mhm.
Sandra Rose Michael. Because
And it
Sandra
just
Rose,
feels more flowy and resonant to the truth of who you are. And being that Archangel Michael is so close with you and been working with you your whole life, he is your spirit family. So
yeah,
how beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah.
Now
So,
that makes sense.
so where were we before that?
We were talking about mom and dad, the majorette, and the
Okay.
foundations of
Yeah,
aloha,
that's that
and the
thing.
DNA is it's
This
in
is
the
the
ethers, it's
dance
in the
of the
spin.
DNA, literally. It's the dance of the DNA that's what, that infinity wave, the infinitely projected Mobius, that infinity wave. My most exciting day in kindergarten, about that old, but my most exciting day was we made Mobius strips.
Oh.
Oh,
Did
it
any of the other kids think it was cool?
I don't know, but I was like,
You were
"Oh,
excited.
yeah." I totally get this.
Mhm.
And so that was my most exciting day, in school. My other most exciting day in school was, I think it was 4th or 5th grade, where I really dived into the Fibonacci sequences, that golden mean. The
Mhm.
golden mean. Is that a great name for understanding the
Yes.
geometry of life?
Oh, and now we're coming into the golden age
Uh-huh.
and the golden mean of the DNA resequencing and zipping back together as the E systems does. It's
Yeah.
quite prophetic.
Yeah, so before the technology, I was heard very, very clearly, intentionally to put the Fibonacci sequence before the cellular replication patterns
Mm.
and how to work with that. But it's designed to look like 12 strands of DNA to activate all of our latent DNA capabilities and things like that. So there's lots of, how we got to where we got with the technology. But yeah, in high school, so then I was head majorette, but um, I was in all the AP classes, all the advanced placement, all you know the advanced classes on everything. But it was my junior year where I realized I was really kind of in trouble.
Mm. Were you bored or just
Well,
unchallenged?
yeah, I was
How
bored
kind
in
of
school,
trouble?
yes.
Because I don't see you getting like in trouble for, other things, but
Not so
yeah.
much.
How so? How so?
But what I realized was, I did the ACT and SAT tests,
Uh,
and I tested above 99th percentile on
again.
way above 99th percentile on both of them.
Um,
And so when I thought about that, it was like, "Oh, holy shift. This isn't good." That means that means there's less than 1% of people on this planet
yeah.
that
Understand things the way you do.
if I'm like, if I'm really like that, some of the highest IQ on the planet, we're really in trouble. That's it's like, "Oh, no, this isn't good."
Wait, what? We need to do something.
Oh, no, this isn't good. So part of what the technology is designed to do with that right-left brain synchronization for accessing those ideal brain states, but it's also designed to trigger people's genius because everybody has their own genius, and that's just so important to understand. Everybody
Yes.
has their own genius, and we wanna trigger everybody's mastery and their own gifts to be brought forward for the world. Because my whole thing is from day one coming in was a new heaven, a new earth, and we're here to fulfill that, you know?
Absolutely. Never mind that
How
your
do we
parents are making bombs and bombers, but we're here to heal.
We're here to heal the world, and that's been my entire life focus.
Yeah.
So I was really kind of kind of disconcerted by that when they called me in and told me that. But I had also, I think it was in my junior year, I tested top in the state of Ohio in Latin, which I loved,
Mm.
Latin, and of course that's past life recall. And I had this teacher that I know was sent just for me. He only taught there the years that I had him.
Oh, yes. Your
Yeah.
private tutor slash teacher
Well, it was a very small class. Latin wasn't real popular then.
in Ohio.
Or yeah, back then,
And back then,
you
yeah.
know, people were taking French and Spanish. I
Mm.
did end up taking a couple years of French, but I had 2 good solid years of Latin. And, and so I actually tested top in the state in Latin, English, and math.
Oh, that makes sense.
Not history, because I didn't like that because they were lying about it. It was his story, and that upset me because they were lying.
And they left all of her story out of most of the history, so there's
Yeah,
that in many
so
cases.
my dad was a real history buff, and I'm going,
But it's
something wrong
missing.
about these stories.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that, but how I talked about how I worked with the Latin, was I would record the declinations and things and record them and play them in my sleep.
Mm.
I would also sleep on my books.
Subliminal studying.
So, yeah, because it's sleep learning.
Hmm.
When you really understand all the capabilities of the mind from what you get from Mensa,
Mm.
when you really understand how powerful, we want to use more than 10% of that brain.
Oh, yeah. It's
So I was always
there for a
pushing
reason.
those limits and see what all this, what all can we learn,
Mhm.
what all can we know, even more important,
Yes, and
at a
now what we
real
do with that.
level. And for me, the Latin was, you know, my teacher of Latin was incredible. He was vegetarian. Of course, I had decided I was vegetarian at 4 years old because I was petting a cow
Mm.
and looking in the eyes, and, my astrologer years later asked, "What was so traumatic that happened to you at 4 years old?"
Mm.
I was petting a cow, looked in their eyes, and realized that people ate them. And I thought the rule was, "Thou shalt not kill." I took that Bible serious.
Yeah, literally.
And so that's when I realized I just couldn't kill, and it's old memories of the temples and things too, because it was all about purity of diet. Jesus's teachings, he comes from the Essenes, the Essene knowledge, the Essene teachings. So I also studied
Mhm.
that. So, but that's how I did the sleep learning. And then math, I could do everything in my head, advanced computations. So that was real easy. And, and the English.
So what was the transition from high school to college? And I know there was kind of like an accelerated jump, if you will,
Yeah.
in your last year or so.
Oh, that's where I
How did
really,
that happen?
because here I tested higher than anybody in the state, right?
Mhm,
At
mhm.
4.0 or whatever, grade point, all that. Tested top in the state, Latin, English, and math, 90 above 99th percentile, and I had the worst attendance record in the entire state. Because I could learn so
Highest
much more.
grades, lowest attendance. Mm.
And so they knew I wasn't quite getting it from my teachers, because I was a reader,
Mhm.
and I would read. Yeah, I'd go to the library and come home with 20 books at a time and read them all and
As
take them
with
all
most
back.
inventors and innovators, they're self-taught and self-educated. That's partly the way is that you're paving the new path. There isn't a textbook yet
Yeah,
for what you're wanting to know. You're creating the textbook through
yeah,
your life's teaching.
but it's also through getting as much knowledge of, from authorities
Mhm.
as you possibly can,
Yes.
and internalizing it to where at a cellular level.
Mm.
And, you take all the information and then decipher it down into what works. So, I was studying a lot of psychology and things like that besides all the religions.
All of them.
Yeah.
Huh.
And so, that was an interesting time, so I was in high school. Through my senior year, I had more than enough credits to graduate, or enough credits to graduate, but I was I was so over the school. But also it was the time of war, you know, which is I'm all about peace. So everybody thought I was a flower child, thought I was in drugs, and I wouldn't touch an aspirin. Because I had these round wire-rimmed glasses. And, they just didn't my brain's just it's a different place to be. And so, I was all about peace. So, it was during the Vietnam War,
Mm.
and I fell in love with this gorgeous, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, 6 foot 2 or 3 guy
Mm.
when I was in high school, 2 years older than me. And he was gonna be drafted, so he joined the Air Force.
Oh, to not be drafted
To
into.
not be drafted
Mhm.
into the Army
Right.
for the Vietnam War, because remember, they weren't coming back in good shape from that war.
Or at all sometimes, right.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And so he joined the Air Force. I was 17, I married him in January of my graduation year, 71. I married him, right out of basic training, and I drove across country
Mm.
from because he got stationed at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. So I drove across country all by myself. My first car was a '65 Mustang convertible. Well, I knew that wasn't gonna make it because that would be, like, found on road dead, fix or repair daily.
Mhm.
That Mustang wasn't gonna make it. I bought a Volkswagen Beetle.
Totally different vehicles.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I had worked since I was 14, so and I'd been working through school, all that too. So I bought this Volkswagen Beetle, it was, not automatic, it was stick
Mhm,
shift,
mhm.
and at 17, I drove that from Ohio to Tucson, Arizona, Davis-Monthan Air Force Base.
Mm.
I had completed that, you know, that eh, that half a year,
Mhm.
so I dropped out the last semester.
Yeah.
Before because I didn't figure I needed to walk
You
or
had the
what was
credits,
I
you
gonna
had the
stick around
SATs.
for?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had all that. I took my transcripts with me to Tucson, Arizona, and to make money, I worked as a transcriptionist, because I could type really well and my English skills were off the charts, top of my state in English. So I was a transcriptionist for attorneys and things like that. Um, and
This looks like a transcription as well. So you're transcribing light language in some ways.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, this is transcription of a lot of information, so layered and layered and layered. But so then had brought my transcripts with me. I went to Pima College, said, "Here's my transcripts. I wanna go to college here," and created my course studies and what I wanted to study. But everybody was so upset with me in Marion, Ohio. How dare I not
Leave them.
graduate, and how dare I? They were so upset with me. Yeah, in fact, I mean, just it was, uh, but I would have had a free scholarship to any school I wanted, Harvard, any of them, a free scholarship, total scholarship to any of them,
Mm.
and I escaped.
You said, "Thank you, no thank you. I
Yes,
will
and it
do my best."
really was an escape because I would have been in those top secret government programs.
Yeah, entrapped in that system and
Uh-huh.
those beliefs.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
everybody was so upset with me that I was disowned and everything.
Well, you veered off the conventional path and paved your own. So that is another mark of a genius. And many innovators and inventors of our past is that you do have to make it up on your own. And there isn't a program in the conventional society that can match or even align with what you came here for. So
Yeah, and it was like, I gotta get on with my life.
and purpose and
Rather
healing
than
the
sitting
planet.
here in the school and looking out the window, or, you know it was like there wasn't any point, to me. I gotta get on with my life. I mean, hormones might have had a role in that, I'm not sure, but I was a virgin.
Hmm.
Yeah, and by the way, I married this man, he married me. I was rebelling. He was gorgeous, blonde hair, blue-eyed. I have 2 gorgeous daughters that are blonde hair, blue-eyed.
Hmm. Hmm.
And, but I was rebelling against the IQ stuff. So I was gonna marry for just love. And he was a D student. It really wasn't fair to him because my brain ran circles around him.
Yeah.
So it wasn't so good, a match.
Mm-mm. No, and especially being your parents being sapiosexual, right? That brains are very, very attractive, and having
Yeah.
that level of connection is important.
But also he married me because I was the first virgin he'd found.
Well,
Uh
so your values were a little,
You have
yeah,
to laugh at it.
you do. It's really cute.
Well, we'll never do that again.